We have to tackle the anxiety beast first so that we can then be more effective in the rest of our communication.
Welcome, everybody, to what is going to be an amazing episode of Untapped. My name is Todd Jason, and as always, I'm joined by the wonderful, the amazing Lauren Weinstein, and I know we've both been looking forward to this episode for some time. And when we came up for the idea of Untapped, we wanted to make sure that we not only brought in guests who had a lot of great experience in their area of expertise, but also people who had practical advice and everyday tools that our listeners can use in their moments to help them untap more success, freedom, and ease in their lives and their work. And boy, do we have a great one today. And we're super excited to welcome Matt Abrahams to the conversation. Matt is an interpersonal communication master, truly is, who lectures at Stanford School of Business. He's also a sought-after keynote speaker and communication consultant for Fortune 100 companies. His podcast is called Think Fast, Talk Smart, and it ranks number one in the career and business category in several countries, including India, Israel, Canada, and Hong Kong. It's also in the top 5 here in the US and the UK. And his TED Talks have racked up over 5 million views. And he also has another video on YouTube that has 36 million views. Crazy, right? And his work is so out there because it's relevant and it's needed. So please take notes today if you want to improve your communication skills. And his new book is called Think Faster, Talk Smarter, which discusses proven strategies to speak successfully when you're put on the spot, right? So super cool. So Matt, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and just thank you so much for being here with us today.
Well, Todd and Lauren, I am thrilled to be here with you. I am excited to continue the conversations we've had spanning many, many months, and in the case of Lauren, many, many years.
That's so special to have you here personally. Matt and I taught together for 5 years at Stanford Business School, a class called The Essentials of Strategic Communication. And you should all know, not only is he an incredible communicator, but one of the kindest, loveliest humans I've ever met. Just an incredible person. So special to have you with us. Thank you. To start, really basic, the name of your book, which again, we highly recommend, is Think Faster, Talk Smarter. What would you say it means to think fast and talk smart? How would you define that?
Yeah, so the book is trying to solve the problem that Lauren, you and I struggled with our students and many people struggle in their lives, and that is this notion of speaking in the moment. A lot of us, if we've ever had any planning around communication and training, it's always the planned communication. It's the presentation, the pitch, the meeting with an agenda, yet most of our communication happens in the moment. So Think Fast, Talk Smart is all about how in the moment can I consolidate my thoughts, package them up in a way that is coherent, concise, and compelling, and meet the needs of the circumstance I'm in, answering a question, giving feedback, making small talk. And thinking fast is really about pattern recognition, understanding what's going on in the context, what's needed, understanding what you feel in that moment. And then the talking smarter is really the structuring that information in a way that can be very helpful. So those two parts are key to being effective in the moment when communicating.
Very clear and very concise. I appreciate that. Good model. It can often be challenging for us, I think, in the moment conversations because we get very anxious.
Yeah.
Right? What am I going to say? How do I say it? Are people going to judge me? How can we deal with that? What would you recommend for someone that gets anxious in these speaking situations?
Well, you well know I can talk a lot about this. So anxiety looms large in all communication. Most people get nervous in high stakes communication, be it planned or spontaneous. And there are a lot of things we can do to learn to manage that anxiety. They have to do with things we do for our symptoms as well as the sources. So let me just give you a taste of this, and then I'm happy to share more later or give you some resources to look at. But in terms of symptoms, that's what goes on physically with us. And the single best thing we can do to manage our anxiety is to do some deep belly breathing, the kind of breath you would do if you've ever done yoga or Tai Chi, where you really are filling your lower abdomen. And it is during this deep breathing that our relaxation response kicks in, and primarily through the exhalation. It's the exhale that's most key. So I like to joke the rule of lung, not the rule of thumb, is to have your exhale be twice as long as your inhale. And that will help many people, not all, but many people. And then there are other things we can do. For example, those who get shaky, that's adrenaline trying to move us from threat to safety. So using movement, harnessing movement for good can be helpful. So purposeful movement, like stepping in at the beginning of a presentation or gesturing broadly, gives that adrenaline a place to go. So there's some things we can do to manage the symptoms. Sources are the things that initiate and exacerbate our anxiety, and there are many. The one I spent a lot of time in the new book talking about is this notion of many of us when we speak, especially in the moment, we want to do it right. We want to be perfect. And that puts a lot of pressure on ourselves. And at the cognitive level, it stresses our bandwidth. If I'm constantly judging and evaluating everything I say, it means I have limited or less bandwidth to actually focus on what I'm saying. So I like to say it's about connection, not perfection. We need to focus our energy and effort on the value we bring to the audience rather than doing it right. And quite frankly, there is no right way. There are better ways and worse ways when it comes to communication, but there is no one right way. So those are just some examples of things we can do to manage symptoms and sources. I certainly have more resources, and Lauren, you're well aware that there are lots of other things that people can do, but we have to tackle the anxiety beast first so that we can then be more effective in the rest of our communication.
Every client first session, we always focus on breathing, just from a place of common ground. Everything. You think more clearly, you speak more slowly, you're much more effective. And then the piece you said around connection, not perfection. I like to say, where is your spotlight? Most of us put the spotlight on ourselves. How am I doing? How am I coming across? But putting it out at the audience, the spotlight's on them, and you're really focused on helping them understand, and connection makes a really big difference as well.
Absolutely. I just love hearing you talk about those things, Lauren. I miss it.
I know, I miss it too.
Oh, cool. You guys taught together for like 5 years. I feel honored.
We did. We could
right
finish
here.
each other's sentences. So
I
sorry,
see
Todd.
that.
We don't mean to leave you out, but
No, it's not leaving me out. I actually really feel like the influence right now. I've been teaching with Lauren for the last year, right? I'm not 2.0, but I've been doing this a lot. But I really see the similarities in terms of how much she picked up from you, really.
And I picked up a lot from Lauren too.
Yeah. But I want to ask you a question around the impromptu speaking, right?
Yeah.
Because for me, like what you said around the beginning is great. So to prepare ourselves for anxiety and get to the sources. But what about those times where just it's impromptu and we feel ourselves, or maybe we're not even aware, but we are anxious and we are stressed and our best communication isn't coming out in those moments? Are there things that we can actually do when we just find ourselves all of a sudden in a situation that doesn't feel comfortable, or we feel uncertain or unsure of what we're going to say?
Yeah. So first and foremost, everybody can get better at their spontaneous speaking. One of the biggest myths is that you're either born with it or you're not. And that's not true. You can certainly improve. And in those moments where all of a sudden you're put on the spot and you have that major rush of adrenaline and you're feeling really nervous, there are a few things that you can do. First, we have to realize that we don't have to respond right away. We have this imagined pressure that I have to just respond immediately. You ask me a question, I have to give an immediate answer. You ask for feedback, I have to give you that feedback right away. That's not true. We can take a beat. We can pause. We can even say, let me think about that. Or we can ask a follow-up question to get clarification. We can paraphrase. There are lots of things we can do to buy us that little bit of time we need to collect ourselves. The other thing we can do is in these situations, we can engage the audience in a way so that the spotlight, like Lauren just said, isn't just on us, it's shared. So if you were to ask me a tough question, I could immediately turn it and say, well, tell me what you all think. Or I can imagine that this looms large for all of us. What does this mean for us? So all of a sudden, I go from being in the spotlight and being the communicator to being the facilitator. So I'm sharing that spotlight. So it is realizing that in those moments, there are things that we can do, and those things can actually help us be better focused so that we can respond more appropriately. So it's not the case that we absolutely have to respond right away. We can actually leverage that. And then I'm hoping, and I know we'll talk about this because Lauren knows how important this is to me. There are roadmaps we can follow, structures, frameworks that we can lean into. So in that moment, once I've caught my breath, I can put myself on a track that gets me from A to B in a way that I can feel very comfortable and confident.
It's really about getting that space, right? It's like you have a tool to give yourself the space, which most of us don't do. Right. And it's such wisdom. So both of those examples that you just mentioned, the number one of taking a beat gives yourself that space to calibrate and your mind a chance to actually come up with what is properly wanting to be said. And then also the spotlighting out again gives yourself a little bit more space to then calibrate again. So I love that.
I'd love to speak about structure, as you mentioned. One more anxiety question, which is I think one thing that trips us up is we feel the need to be perfect, to get it right. So as a recovering perfectionist, I really appreciate your advice that we should dare to be dull. Can you share a little bit more about what that means?
Yes. So the methodology that the book is all based on borrows a lot from neuroscience, from psychology, sociology, and improvisation. And in the world of improv, they have lots of wonderful sayings that are meaningful, not just to communication, but life in general. And one of them is dare to be dull. And what dare to be dull simply means is focus on just getting the task done. And in so doing, you free yourself up to do it really well. I've taken this phrase and changed it a little bit, and I like to call it maximize your mediocrity. But it boils down to cognitive load. It's very simple. Your brain is like a computer. But if you have lots of apps running, each one of those windows is running less well because of all the other ones that are open. And the same thing is true when you're judging and evaluating and striving for perfection. You are constantly evaluating and judging, which is sucking away valuable bandwidth. So when I just tell myself, be mediocre, dare to be dull, just get it done, focus on the task at hand, I dial down that over evaluation, freeing up resources. So dare to be dull, maximize your mediocrity are all saying, just get it done. Focus on the other person, communicate, and it helps. And for some people, before they go into spontaneous speaking situations, if they just remind themselves, dare to be dull, maximize mediocrity, it puts them in the right headspace so that they can actually be much more effective. So it works really well. It's very memorable. And if you do it and do it enough, all of a sudden it can become a habit.
I love that. It really takes the pressure off so we can really just focus, like you said, on the task at hand. And it's really any situation. It could be a cocktail party, it could be dating, relationships, work. Whenever we take the pressure off ourselves, I'm just going to show up and do my best. It's not about being perfect. It's just getting it done or connecting even better. It really changes the game.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think it's also a mindset shift that we can always get better at this, that you're a stand for improving our communications, really by improving our ability to be self-aware in the moments. And it's something that we don't often look at, right? Because so much of our lives is these interpersonal communications and how we're talking to people. And you really have broken down the science of this, saying, hey, there's ways that we can actually do this. And so a lot of this is about taking space. It actually takes the pressure off of having to do it right. And actually in that relaxation is when more cogent information comes through in the practice of improv and also in life. But I'd love to hear some of the actual communication tactics, the actual structure of how you recommend having these conversations or these communications. I know it's one of your specialties, but we would love to hear about it a little bit.
Yeah. So let me first define what I mean by a structure. A structure is nothing more than a logical connection of ideas. Many of us, when we're nervous or we feel under pressure, we just list and itemize information, and our brains are not wired for lists. In fact, Todd and Lauren, how many items do you need to buy from the grocery store before you actually have to write them down? For me, it's 3. I can't remember more than 3. I invariably will forget something. So our brains just aren't wired for that. However, our brains are wired for story, for a beginning, a middle, and an end, a logical connection. In fact, we call long-term memory episodic memory, episodes. And so there are ways that we can leverage structure to help. The structure everybody is familiar with. If you've ever watched a television advertisement, you are familiar with problem, solution, benefit. Most advertisement introduces some problem, challenge, or issue. Their product or service then addresses that issue, and then there's some benefit that they talk about or show you. That's a structure. It's a logical connection of ideas. There are myriad structures that you can use to help you. A structure is nothing more than a roadmap. It gives you a place to start and a place to end. It doesn't mean you're memorizing. It just means that I know that when I speak the problem, it's followed by the solution, and then the solution is often followed by the benefit. And it gives me freedom within that structure. Let me go back, Todd, to this notion of improv. You know, as somebody who does improv, and others might know as well, that improv actually is highly structured, which sounds counterintuitive, right? But improv games all have rules, and you follow those rules. Improv in general, people will always say yes and. They will dare to be dull. They'll do what needs to be done. When you know that those rules exist, it frees you up to be in the moment and to play. In the case of improv, having a structure does the same thing. It frees you because it gives you the bounds of what you'll do and what you won't do. And the benefit of a structure is it keeps your audience with you as well. It gives you a place to start, a place to end, ways to transition. So structure is critical. And if you just know a few structures, you can make your communication so much easier.
What I really appreciate about the book is you have a structure for almost every situation. I was wondering if we could run through a few so the audience can see what it's like to use
Sure.
structure.
Happy to.
Right. So one, you talk about pitching a product or service or an idea. What might that look like?
Right. So pitching can be done in problem, solution, benefit. Here's the problem. Here's how we solve it. Here's the benefit. But I have this 4-sentence starter framework that I think was really helpful for a quick elevator pitch, executive summary level pitch. And the sentence starters are this: what if you could, so that, for example, and that's not all. What if you could, so that, for example, and that's not all. Let me actually give you an example of a spontaneous speaking situation that's pitching something. So Lauren or Todd, give me a product or service that you would like me to pitch. Now, it has to be something I know so I can actually pitch it. But
Vacuum cleaner.
A vacuum cleaner.
I'm just doing my improv thing.
There you
improv. That's the first thing that came to my head. So there you go. Vacuum cleaner.
Perfect. What if you could clean your house efficiently and effectively so that your place always looks great? For example, imagine that your relatives are coming over and you don't have a lot of time. You whip out this brand new vacuum cleaner XYZ and you can clean your house in half the time. And that's not all. You also, using these great HEPA filters built in, will make your home absolutely allergy free. What if you could, so that, for example, and that's not all. And just by finishing those prompts, I put together a pitch. Now, you might say it's not the best pitch ever, but in the moment, without much time to think, I think it gets the job done.
I love it. That was amazing. I feel like we should clap for that.
What's really cool about it, though, is that you're right, because it can feel almost perfunctory to learn structure for communication. But actually, like in improv, when you do it, it gives you such ease. And it actually, you become masterful at it, right? So like great salespeople, they master their communication using a structure just like that enable them to then flow with different words, different ways of saying things, but still using the same structure. And is that true? Is it that we just use the same words and we memorize them, or do we just naturally understand what we're doing and then we can flow with it depending on the situation?
It's absolutely the latter. That's the goal. The goal is to get to a place where you're just comfortable. Think of it like this. The analogy I like to use is athletes. Athletes go through lots of drills over and over, preparing them to be spontaneous in the moment. So when the moment comes up, they don't have a planned script they're following. They just have done this enough. They have certain drills. They know that left goes right, then right goes left, or whatever it is. And it just happens naturally. And that's what we're striving for. So all of this work sets you up to be better and more spontaneous in the moment.
One common challenge is small talk. So many of my clients say, I go to this party or this event and it's awkward. I don't know what to say. I know you have a great structure for that as well. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So small talk gets a really bad rap. There's a lot of big, important stuff that happens during small talk. So I think as a separate note, we should rebrand it. Rebrand small talk. And in fact, just as a real quick aside here, I want everybody to think about your friends, your friendship network. I bet that at least one person in all of our close friendship networks, we met through some form of small talk. It's a ubiquitous way that we get to know people. We just have a negative association with it. So when it comes to small talk, first and foremost, we have to be guided by a principle that I learned from a friend and colleague. Her name is Rachel Greenwald. She's a fascinating person. She's an academic and a professional matchmaker. And she taught me that the overarching goal of small talk is to be interested, not interesting. And what that means is that when we approach small talk, we have to approach with curiosity, with questions, with noticing what's in the environment. It's not about having that one-liner or that zinger that's just perfect. It's about just keeping the conversation going. So if that's your goal, then it's all about inquiry. It's all about questioning. And I have a structure that I love, and it's useful in many circumstances, way beyond just small talk. But it is 3 questions: what, so what, now what? And in the case of small talk, you can use this in 2 ways. One, you can literally just ask those 3 questions. So if we were to meet at a cocktail party, I could just say, oh, what brings you here? Or what kind of things are you finding interesting? And then when you respond, I say, oh, so why is that important? Or tell me more about how that impacts. So that's the so what. And then what are you going to do next with that? Or what are you looking forward to? That's the now what. So literally just asking what, so what, now what in response to what people say gets the conversation going. Now, when it's your turn to speak and somebody asks you a question, you can use what, so what, now what to answer. What is your response? So what is why it's important to you and perhaps to others. And now what is what you're hoping to do next. So remembering those three questions, what, so what, and now what, can help you in small talk as well as many other situations. So be interested, not interesting, and have what, so what, now what in your back pocket. And all of a sudden, small talk becomes enjoyable and productive.
Yeah. I really love the be interested, not interesting, right?
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Because really what it is, it's being empathetic. It's actually like really turning your attention towards another. And that's what creates that charismatic connection that then leads to more beneficial conversations. I'm curious if you have a structure around how to have difficult conversations, how to have challenging conversations. Now that's broad. Okay. But I'm just curious if I were to ask you, do you have a structure for entering into something that you know is going to be difficult, either with one person or a group? How would you respond to that?
Well, so let me again. So a lot of these situations, I always start with mindset and approach. So when there's a challenge in conversation, maybe it's a negotiation, maybe it's a potential conflict, or even giving critical feedback, I like to frame it as this is an opportunity to problem solve. Now, clearly there are crucial situations where something is going on that's wrong and you just have to stop it, right? It's not about entering into a dialogue. It's that's wrong, you must stop. But much of our conflictual, crucial conversations, challenging conversations, can be envisioned as an opportunity to problem solve. So if I go in thinking that I want to invite you to help me solve this problem, that changes the way I approach things. I don't want to make you defensive. I want to invite you to collaborate with me. So I have to reframe it. And that's going to change the tone. It's going to change how I speak, when I speak, what I say. Now, in terms of structure, I think it's really important to lay out first and foremost what it's about, because many times people might not be clear on what are we actually having the conversation on. So I have another structure. I call it the 4 I's, because each step starts with I, and 4 I's like glasses. It helps you see things more clearly. So the first I is information. Here's what we're talking about. Give the information. It's objective. It's not emotionally laden. It's objective. It's you're repeatedly late to meetings or something like it. It's just objective. The second step, the second I is impact. What is the impact for you, the person initiating the conversation? And this is where we use I language. Another reason I call it the 4 I's. So I might say, I feel you're not prioritizing this the way I am, instead of saying you're not prioritizing. So it makes it less accusatory and less likely to invoke defensiveness because I own it. I feel, I think. Third step is the actual invitation itself. And this could be a question. What can we do? Or how together can we work on this? Or it could be a declaration where you give some thoughts and feelings you have about how to approach it. And then the fourth I is implications. What are the consequences, positive or negative, of doing so? So laying out the 4 I's structures the conversation, not just what you say, but how you think about it. So it helps you clarify what is the objective, what is the impact on me, what's the invitation, and what are the implications. So by just literally walking through the 4 I's, it helps you.
That's making it so much easier to have structure. We go in and we get in and we get out of each piece. I find that it makes a tremendous difference. Before we move out of structure, I would have loved to ask you about apologies. I thought that was a really interesting one, because I think sometimes we don't, because we don't know what to say or we feel awkward or embarrassed. Can you share with us the apology structure?
Yeah. So often we are put in a situation where we have to apologize on the spot, and that can be really challenging for many of us. And we have to avoid common pitfalls that we have with apologies. So many of us, when we apologize for how the person is feeling. So we'll say things like, I'm sorry that you're feeling sad. Well, that's not really an apology, right? That's really simply just talking about how we made the other person feel. An apology to me has 3 steps, and I like acronyms. This one is AAA. You start by acknowledging. You acknowledge what you did. You're laying the groundwork for here's what we're talking about. Then you express your appreciation for how it might have made the person feel. That's the second A. And then the amends you're going to make. For example, let's imagine we're in a meeting and I interrupt you. And I can clearly see that you're upset. So I might apologize by saying, I'm very sorry for interrupting you in the midst of your conversation. I can imagine my interrupting you made you feel less valued and was embarrassing. The next time, not only will I make sure to listen to you all the way through, I'm going to paraphrase what you say before I comment. So I've acknowledged what I did. I've tried to appreciate how that makes you feel. And then I suggest what I'm going to do differently to make sure this doesn't happen again or to remedy the situation. We call that amend. So it's acknowledge, appreciate, amend. And that can really, really help. Now, we have to think about some things. We have to be careful here. If I really embarrass you or put you in an awkward situation, the apology in that moment might only make it worse. So it might make sense for me to apologize shortly thereafter. So again, we don't want to add insult to injury when we're apologizing. So we just have to be very cautious and careful. But a good, thorough apology can make all the difference in the world and can help maintain the relationships that you have.
Yeah, beautiful, Matt. I'm just curious, how many different structures do you have? Your book is chock full of them. And the reason why I'm asking is because knowing your work and actually watching a lot of your videos, following your podcast, it's clear that this work takes consistency to get. You don't just wake up and have all these structures. But how do you recommend us studying and learning these things, right? Do we read the whole book? We write them on note cards? Practically speaking, because I'm like blown away. I'm like, wow, there's a lot that I can use even in this conversation. But I want to know, what's the best way for me to actually use this, practice it? How would you respond to it?
Yeah. So the book actually has two really practical sections where in each chapter, I give these try this activities where put the book down right now and just go try this. Because you're right. The only way to get good at communication is to do communication. You can read about it. You can listen to podcasts. I hope you do, but you really have to do it. So in the book, every chapter has try this sections. And at the end, it has these notions of go out and actually use it in these ways. So we're almost like homework at the end of each chapter. And those are, I think, good steps to help people to really try to practice this. The first part of the book is a 6-step methodology. You can start anywhere in the methodology and pick out the little parts you want to work on. So you don't have to feel that this is daunting where I have to master all of it. It's not that at all. Any little step you take will help you. There are many, many structures. I think in the book total, there are probably like 15 plus different structures that I mentioned. You don't have to know all 15. Pick one that works for you. Pick a situation that's challenging and then pick one that works for you. Some structures that I mentioned are sort of like a Swiss Army knife. You can use them in lots of situations. What, so what, now what is a great example of that. There are other structures that are very nuanced that are just for specific situations, like answering a question. Or I actually interviewed somebody who is training to be a priest, and he said there's a structure that they use for sermons. Well, that's a very specific situation. So train more generally, and then you can dive into the more specifics. I would hate for somebody to be overwhelmed by all these structures and then not try them. Start wherever you can. It will help you.
One thing that I really appreciate that you've been modeling so beautifully is always having an example when you speak. When I work with clients, they're like, this is communication gold. If you do nothing else, do this. Having a concrete example really helps you be clear, helps you be compelling. Could you tell us a little bit about that, how important that is? When you gave the vacuum cleaner, right? You really modeled for us, and you've been doing that throughout. So yeah, we'd love for you to share that with us.
Yeah. So the way our brains work is we tend to remember things that are more concrete and detailed than high level information. So landing something with an example can really help anchor somebody. If you think about it, in most of our communication, we're trying to equip people to take what we've said and perhaps articulate it on our behalf. So if you're in a job interview, the person interviewing you is likely not the person in that moment who's going to say you're hired, right? They have to take the information about you, go run it by other people, and they need to be able to represent you well. So if I use concrete examples, not only will you stand out, it makes you unique, but it also helps them remember. So leveraging examples can be really, really helpful, and I encourage you to do it. Now, Lauren knows I like to do this when I teach. I want to take a timeout. I want to have a meta moment. I just used an example in giving an answer about the importance of giving an example. I talked about interviewing. When you train yourself to just know that when I speak, I should use examples, it helps. I'll give you another area where this really helps. Many people are non-native speakers of the language that they're currently speaking. I have lots of non-native speaking clients and students. Examples really help them to remember what's being said. And if you are a non-native speaker, adding an example gives you one more chance at clearly articulating your point. Many non-native speakers are afraid that I'm going to use the wrong words or I'm not going to make sense. Well, say what you're going to say, then give an example. That gives you 2 shots of explaining what you're trying to say. So leveraging examples is helpful. And here's the beauty of it. You can actually stockpile examples. Think of a structure as a recipe. I know I use lots of analogies for structure. I'm a lousy cook, but if I have a recipe and I have all of my ingredients pre-arranged and pre-cut and sautéed and everything, I can do pretty well cooking. So if I think in advance, I'm going into this chit-chat situation where small talk might happen, but I know I'm going to run into people who work for this particular company, I can stockpile a few examples or stories so that when I'm in the moment and the situation allows, I just pull one of those stories in, put it in a structure, and all of a sudden the conversation goes more easily. So there's a lot that we can do.
And going back to what you mentioned earlier, the practice piece, this really does become second nature. I coached my mother for a job interview to use I call it headline example relevance. Now, years later, she uses it just personally. We'll be on a phone call and she's like, for example, and this is what it means, right? So you just get those reps in and all of a sudden you're doing everything Matt says in a way that's subconscious and natural.
Let me ask you this, Matt. Sometimes we're using these structures and we're getting better in our communication. And then we notice that, wow, the people that we're talking to, not doing it that way, or they're not that great, or like we're not getting the response that we want. And so there's this idea that, oh, we're doing all this communication because we want to elicit a response from someone else. How do you coach people around that potential pitfall or that potential frustration where we're learning these techniques, we're getting better doing the growth work ourselves, and then we go out there in the world, yet we still feel disappointed or frustrated at times that we're not getting the response? It's very common in our practice where people say that to us, I'm doing better, I'm growing. But so how would you respond to someone that comes to you with that question?
Yeah. So one, I love the people who are taking benefit from your work and they're seeing differences. Part of it, I think, is role modeling and patience and grace, right? So I think it's unrealistic to think that everybody is going to develop personally and professionally at the same pace and cadence. And I think the best thing we can do is just role model. I think it's really important to give appropriate praise and constructive feedback when appropriate. And a great way to do that is not punishing the negative, but rewarding the positive. So if I'm in an interaction with somebody and I'm really trying to be very clear and concise and present, and I notice that they're distracted and rambling, rather than saying, hey, you're distracted and rambling, or hey, pay attention to me, when they do say something that's coherent, connected, and in the moment, reward that. Say, hey, thank you so much. That was really helpful when you said it that way. So part of it is just awareness building in others. Part of it is role modeling and just realizing that not everybody develops at the same time. My vision of professional and personal development is it's like climbing a mountain. Everybody's at different points of the mountain and we're all striving to get to the top, but everybody's in a different place. And as long as everybody's moving forward, then we have success. So while I appreciate the frustration, I think it is reasonable that we will be out of sync in times. And our job is to just help others by giving them information that's can help move them in the right direction and perhaps expedite it along the way.
Yeah, I really love that. I love the role modeling because what it does really is it takes away the attachment to a result. All we have control over is our experience and the things that we're feeling, then the words that come out of our mouth subsequently. So if we focus on that and use your techniques, we are just role modeling and then we're listening, we're becoming more empathetic. And that in itself creates the space, maybe even energetically, for someone else to actually show up in a better way, as opposed to, oh man, I really want this response. And that frustration then somehow seeps in the interpersonal dynamic doesn't help. So the ability just to sit back and role model feels to me to be really important, that we're doing this just to become better ourselves. And that in of itself will help our dynamics improve.
Totally agree with that. Totally agree with that.
Yep.
Changing topics, interestingly, a big part of our work in teaching is training with Japanese samurai masters.
Yes.
And you've trained in martial arts for decades and have shared that it's really helped you with your communication. Can you share more about that? What have you learned from martial arts that we can all take away to improve our own communication?
Yeah, and I joined you for one of your sessions with the samurai, and I think that's so cool. So thank you for asking. You can tell Lauren knows me well. Yes, martial arts have been part of my life for decades. And there are so many lessons that I have learned through my study of the martial arts that help me in my interpersonal relationships and my communication. And there are also a lot of things in my work I do in communication and interpersonal relationships that help when I'm in the karate dojo. I see it as a totally symbiotic relationship. So the martial arts teach you to be present. The martial arts are all about connection. And this sounds weird because we have this MMA view of just people pummeling each other, but martial arts are actually, in many ways, very intimate. And I mean that simply in the means of connection and being present. When you are working with someone, sparring, developing your strengths, you are there present in the moment. In our everyday communication, sometimes the consequences are immediate and sometimes they take a long time. In the martial arts dojo, the consequences are immediate and they make themselves known, often in a painful way. But the point is, it's about being present. It's about doing what's needed, responding in the moment. There is no perfect. That's the other thing, is you can always get better. You can always improve. And sometimes, if you were to watch one of my lessons with my sensei, who I've been studying with for decades, you might be befuddled by hearing some of the things he'll say. He'll say things like, "You did that wrong correctly," or "You need to slow down to speed up." And these are counterintuitive, but when you're in the moment, it helps. And then the last thing I'll say that was really profound on me, when I got my first black belt, my instructor, prior to the test, and it was a grueling test, said, "Have fun." And that just blew my mind. It's like, this is not fun. This is going to be grueling. But he said, "You have worked really hard for this. You should enjoy it." And that was a complete mind flip. And that I use that when I go into very stressful interpersonal communications, not to have fun, but to remind myself that this is important to me and I should be present and maybe try to find areas of joy. And then the last thing that I'll share, once I got that rank after that test, he came to me and said, "Congratulations, you've done very well. You should be very proud. Now let's get started." And that blew my mind because I saw the black belt as a culmination. I did not envision it as a beginning. And it truly was a beginning. And that, I think, is the way of all relationships and the way of all interactions, is that we are constantly learning and evolving, and there is always something next that can be better, more connected, more intimate. And we just need to approach it that way. Many of us just want to get these things done, but those getting it done opens up an opportunity for something more. So I could go on forever talking about the impact of martial arts on communication. I love that you leverage some ancient wisdom in what the work you do, and I think it's really valuable.
Yeah. And I just want to say, Matt, that when you said the line, "When I got my first black belt," like, how cool is that? Like, I wish I could say that, right?
I
mean, like,
didn't mean that. If that sound braggadocious,
it's
that
not,
was
no,
not
it's,
the
you
intent.
said it very humbly, but what I'm just saying is that I want to license that line from you, and I want to be able to, because that is a very, very cool thing to be able to say. And we connected the first time we met and we talked about
Yeah.
martial arts, which has been a deep part of my journey. And now it's
Yeah.
coming back again through this. And it's almost like that physical training does impact our mental and emotional lives and our communication, right? And you learn things in the dojo, you learn things in the training that really do accelerate your ability to have more self-awareness and, like you said, presence, that we don't often make that connection, but it's so true. And for some of that, with your level of experience, that's where you've seen probably such a high level of mastery in these other areas coming from that physical practice.
Yeah. And I'll just say one more thing, Todd. I think everybody should find some physical practice that gives them those things. It doesn't have to be the martial arts. It could be playing music, going for walks, whatever. There is something about the physical embodiment that helps with the mental communicating. I encourage everybody to find some physical outlet, whatever it is. For me, it happens to be the martial arts. I met a woman who is, I hadn't seen somebody on rollerblades in a long time, and she's been rollerblading forever, and that's her thing. And that's great. And that's what she gets very similar things out of that I do when I go to the martial arts studio. So find something physical that you can do that helps embolden and rejuvenate your mental practices.
I love that. It's so true. You mentioned walks. Walking is big for me. And I live here in the mountains where there's a lot of panoramic views.
Yeah.
Samurai will teach that too, just by physically seeing something panoramically. It opens up your perspective. You in turn have a broader perspective through doing it physically.
Isn't that so cool? So there's some really cool research that if you're brainstorming, you should be in a space that has big, wide open views, because it gets you thinking differently than when you're cloistered away in a small little room. I find that stuff fascinating.
Makes so much sense. I do too. And I also wanted to highlight what you said about have fun and be a joy, how important that is, because it's counterintuitive, I think. We're like, this is going to be hard and struggle and stressful. But I love Shauna Core, his TED Talk, which is the happy secret to better work. Where he found that we're in a positive state of mind, we perform better, we're smarter, more creative, more productive, all these benefits. So whether it's martial arts or speaking, if you go in, this is an opportunity, this is fun, Even if it's a challenging conversation, I have an opportunity to connect or problem solve. That positive state of mind really does set you up for success.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just love the fact that we can always get better at this. It's one of the things that really dawned on me a bunch of years back that where I am naturally in terms of my communication is something that I can learn and improve. And when you go out in the world and you start experimenting, this is where you start to see the benefit. But I just want to wrap and just say that, wow, if you're not motivated to go out and buy his book or listen to his book, go and do that, because these 15 or so frameworks are gold, everybody. They're absolutely gold. It's why like tens of millions of people know his work, and he teaches at the Stanford School of Business. This is real stuff. We can get better at it. And I just want to personally thank you for being such a stand for helping people ease their communication. This is the cause of so much tension, maybe the most tension, right? In the world is based on the inadequacies that we have in terms of being able to really connect and communicate. So I think what you're doing is actually bigger than just this like communication. This is how we can really change things at a larger level. And I know that you know that, but I just want to honor that you're doing this because it's really needed in the world. So thank you so much.